They thought silence meant defeat, but it was the moment you became untouchable. What if I told you that the scariest sound to them after walking away is your silence? The most haunting sound in their minds is the one where you say absolutely nothing. The one where they expect a reaction but get a void instead. That's when the panic starts. That's when their minds start spinning faster than they ever expected. And that, my friends, is why no contact isn't just silence. It's their worst nightmare. Hey folks, imagine this. Walking into a room expecting a full-blown argument. They've rehearsed their lines. They've got their egos armored up, ready for war. But instead of drama, they find stillness. They expect noise and chaos. But you give them calm, not because you're weak, but because you've risen above it. And that calm, it's unnerving, it's psychological, it's not peace. They feel it as punishment, because silence, real silence, is a mirror. And when they look into it, you didn't show up begging for one more chance. You went quiet, and that silence is when their worst fears begin to surface. Because they didn't fear losing your love, they feared losing the control they had over you. You see, we've all been fed this lie that if you love someone, you're supposed to fight for them. You're supposed to prove your worth, be the bigger person, keep showing up. But let me tell you something raw and real. They left. They didn't choose you. They turned their backs while you were still giving them your best. So tell me, why should you keep proving yourself to someone who made their choice? Silence breaks the cycle. It stops the bleeding. It slams the door on their expectations and forces them to sit with the reality of what they've lost. It's not you trying to win them back. It's you winning yourself back. And when they realize they can no longer reach you, that their words no longer stir you, that their names no longer get a reaction, that's when the storm hits them. No contact isn't passive. It's not some weak move to play it cool. It's a bold act of emotional rebellion. It's telling the world, I don't beg to be chosen. I choose myself. It's not just distance, it's detachment. It's the sacred space where your healing begins and their illusion ends. Let them wonder why you're silent. Wait, it's not kill you. Tag us now. Let them stalk your page and find nothing. Let them sit in the discomfort of not knowing if you're hurting, if you've moved on, or if you ever cared as deeply as they assumed. That mystery, that's the power you've been handing over for free. Take it back. Reclaim it. Because silence isn't empty, it's full of your power. It's the calm before your comeback. It's the proof that you've leveled up from emotional reaction to emotional discipline. And make no mistake, they feel it. Even if they never admit it, your silence echoes louder than any. I miss you ever could. So if you're done playing the fool, if you're done being readable, predictable, and emotionally available to someone who walked out, then let today be the start of your sovereignty. Stay silent, stay sharp, stay sovereign. Comment right now. My silence is power. Press that like button. If you're ready to stop chasing and start building, subscribe because we're just getting started. And folks, stay with me. What's coming next might just flip everything they thought they understood about you. Number 1, silence isn't emptiness, it's exposure. They don't break when you say goodbye. They break when you say nothing afterward. There's a reason your silence shakes them more than your words ever did. You could send 100 messages. You could beg, plead, pour out every ounce of emotion into a text they'll probably skim past. But the moment you go quiet, that's when their minds turn against them. Because silence isn't just absence, it's exposure. It's a psychological spotlight that forces them to sit alone in the wreckage of what they destroyed. Picture this, my friends. a spotlight on an empty stage. No audience, no applause, just a person standing there exposed. Nowhere to hide, no script left to read. That's what your silence does. Just a person dies to the lays, ferv. It strips the mask. It cancels the performance. And suddenly, they're standing there confronted not by your rage or tears, but by the deafening echo of their own choices. They may have walked away thinking it would be easy. They thought they'd get the final word, the final move, the final illusion of control. Maybe they believed you'd come crawling. Maybe they expected drama because that's what most people give. But silence? That wasn't part of the plan. Silence didn't fit the narrative they built in their minds. Now the questions start to creep in. Why aren't they saying anything? Are they hurt? Are they angry? Have they already moved on? And that right there is the trigger. The same mind that once played games with your emotions is now stuck playing games with itself. Every hour you stay silent, the fear grows. Every day you don't react, the illusion begins to crack. They expected you to react like everyone else. They thought they knew your script. But Stoicism isn't about playing the role. They weren't ready for the rewrite. Because silence, when used right, doesn't mean you're too weak to speak. It means you're too strong to waste your breath. You see, people think silence is passive. They think it's surrender. But the truth is, it's a storm with no sound. It's the weight of every truth you chose not to say, pressing down on their conscience. When they hear nothing, they hear everything they feared. And when they get no response, their minds fill in the gaps. And the mind, my friends, is a master of torment. The lie they told themselves was that they were in control, that they could leave and you'd chase, that they could disrespect you and you'd still be waiting. But your silence flipped the frame. It showed them you're not afraid of loss. You're just done losing yourself. And yes, it's hard. I won't pretend it's easy. Staying silent when you want to scream is war. Every fiber in your body will want to break no contact to reach out, to defend your side of the story. You'll want to remind them who you were, what you gave, what they lost. But don't, because the moment you speak, you take the pressure off. You give them relief. You give them power again. Silence is the space where their fantasy dies and the reality of you begins. So hold the line, don't fold. Let your silence work while you rebuild. Let it speak volumes while you sharpen your focus. Because this isn't about being cold. This is about being calculated, conscious, and done explaining your worth to people who chose not to see it. And here's what happens when you master this. You stop bleeding energy. You stop leaking power. As you steers move, less leaders has too. You stop begging people to value what they walked away from. Instead, you let them feel the silence. Let them watch you rise without a word. Let them witness the one thing they never expected, you becoming untouchable. Comment this now if you feel it in your bones. My silence exposes the truth. You feels. Say it, show them, show yourself. Show the world around you that silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom wrapped in power. And stay with me, because what we're about to reveal next is where the silence starts to become their obsession. Number 2, they thought you'd break first, but you went still. They didn't expect the silence because they built their power on your reaction. Let's be honest, my friends. They never saw this version of you coming. They thought you'd fall apart the moment they walked away. That you'd call, that you'd show up in their DMs, that you'd send that long message about how much they meant to you, that you'd chase like you always did. Because in their minds, your love equaled your obedience. Your feelings were their leverage. They believed that if they pulled back, you'd fall forward. But this time, you did the unthinkable. You didn't break. You didn't beg. You didn't flinch. You just went still. And that stillness? That wasn't nothing. That wasn't weakness. That was strategy. That was composure under fire. That was stoic war. You see, they weren't prepared for silence. They were prepared for chaos. They expected the usual fireworks, the texts at 2:00 a.m., the emotional breakdowns, the desperate attempts to explain or fix things. They thought they were the storm. But when they came with lightning, you became the mountain, immovable, untouched. And that, folks, is what messed with their heads. Stillness is terrifying to those who rely on emotional chaos to feel important. When you don't react, you expose them. You hold up a mirror to their ego. You show them their tricks don't work anymore. And suddenly, the power dynamic flips. They're the ones pacing. Now, they're the ones refreshing your page. They're the ones wondering if you were the one who was really in control all along. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a boxer who's been training for a fight. Footwork, punches, combinations. They step into the ring and their opponent just stands there. Not afraid, not flinching, just watching, silent still. That boxer will panic faster than if you hit them, because nothing is more unpredictable than someone who doesn't respond. That's what you became. You became the silence that haunts their confidence. You became the stillness that undid their expectations. And somewhere between your last goodbye and the silence that followed, they started to realize they miscalculated you. They thought you were emotionally dependent. But what they didn't know was that your silence wasn't the beginning of your breakdown. It was the beginning of your transformation. Now, let's talk about you, because I know, deep down, staying still isn't easy. You're human. You've got a heart that cared. You wanted closure. You wanted to say your piece. And let's be real, it's tempting to speak, to react, to remind them of everything they walked away from. But let me ask you something. What would saying all that do? Would it bring them back with respect? Would it rebuild what was broken? Or would it just make them feel like they still have a hold on you? You already know the answer. Because if someone has to hurt you to realize your value, they were never really ready to hold it. And if you have to chase someone to keep them, they were never truly yours to begin with. So you stay still. You don't give them the show they wanted. You don't break character. You don't step down from your throne to convince someone who walked away from the kingdom. You let them sit with the choice they made while you rise in silence. Stillness, when mastered, becomes your shield and your sword. It protects your energy. It sharpens your clarity. It sends a message louder than any words ever could. You don't get to watch me bleed anymore. And here's what really breaks them. Not your rage, not your sadness, but your indifference. Your ability to sit in silence and build yourself without ever looking back. Because deep down, they believed they were unforgettable. But now they're questioning everything. Why haven't they called? Why aren't they watching my stories? Are they already over me? And the more they wonder, the deeper the silence cuts. They thought you'd be the one to fold. But now you're the one folding your life into power, into purpose, into peace. They thought they were your anchor. But now they're watching you set sail with no goodbye. Write this in the comments if you're claiming it today. I stayed still and they crumbled. Tap that like button if you've decided not to break. Because, folks, the next part is where we flip the entire game. Stay with me. We're just getting started. Number 3, no contact isn't revenge. It's a revelation. They thought no contact was your punishment, but it was your awakening. They got it twisted. They thought you were doing this to get a reaction. They thought silence meant you were playing games, that you were waiting in the dark for them to come crawling back. But let me tell you something, my friends. No contact isn't a trick. It's not revenge. It's a revelation. It's the sacred space where the truth finally shows up naked. No filters, no illusions, just clarity, raw, brutal, and freeing. When you go no contact, you're not trying to hurt them. You're trying to heal yourself. You're not trying to punish anyone. You're pressing the reset button on your own soul. You're trying it. So, it's me. And if they feel pain in the process, that's not your fault. That's just the sound of truth, echoing in the spaces where your presence used to protect them from themselves. Imagine this, you're holding a glass of dirty water. You keep trying to clean it by adding more water, shaking it, hoping the dirt disappears. But it never works. Then one day you stop. You let the glass sit still, silent, and slowly the dirt settles and the water clears. That's what no contact does for your life. It doesn't fix them, it clarifies you. It reveals who you were in the noise and who you're becoming in the stillness. They expected you to react. That's what they were banking on. That's how they kept the upper hand. But when you chose to go silent, you pulled the plug on the drama. You unplugged from the chaos. You stopped feeding the narrative they controlled and started writing your own. And here's the wildest part. They don't actually miss you at first. They miss your reactions. They miss the attention. They miss the feeling of being chased. But when those things don't come, when the likes stop, when the phone stays quiet, when they realize you're no longer orbiting their world, that's when the silence stops being just silence. That's when it becomes a mirror. No contact shows them what your presence was really worth. Not by screaming it, not by proving it, but by disappearing and letting the absence say what the words never could. Now, here's the lie they believed, and maybe you did too. That silence is childish, that no contact is petty, that only weak people disappear. Let's break that right now. Weak people cling. Weak people chase. Weak people need constant emotional interaction to feel significant. But strong people withdraw. They recalibrate. They disappear to reconnect with themselves. Not because they want attention, but because they finally realize their peace is non-negotiable. Stoicism teaches us this. The highest form of power is self-restraint. Not reaction, not retaliation, but control. Not over them, but over you. And no contact is the battlefield where that discipline gets forged in fire. But yeah, I get it. It's hard. It hurts, especially when you love them deeply. You want them to know you're hurting. You want them to understand the pain. You want them to feel just a little bit of what you're feeling. But let me ask you something real. If they had the capacity to truly care about your feelings, would they have walked away in the first place? Exactly. So, stop trying to get them to see. Stop trying to make them feel. They made their decision, and now you make yours. You choose to disconnect, not to teach them a lesson, but to teach yourself how powerful you are without their validation. You didn't walk away to wound them. You walked away to wake up. That version of you that once begged, explained, and poured your heart out to people who couldn't hold it. That version is gone, dead, buried in the silence. And what's emerging now? That's the real you, the disciplined you, the clear-eyed, unshakable, rising you. Let them wonder where you went. Let them stalk your page and find nothing. Let them feel the weight of the space you left behind, because if you ever meant anything to them, Silence will say it louder than noise ever could. Comment this right now. My silence revealed everything. Hit that like button if you're done using your words to fight battles that only your absence can win. Subscribe and stay with me, because next, we're digging into what they really fear: losing control. And you're about to find out just how deep that fear runs. Number 5. Their worst fear was never losing you. It was losing control. They didn't leave because they stopped loving you. They left because they thought they still controlled how you'd respond. Here's the truth they won't admit. Not to their friends, not to themselves, and definitely not to you. They weren't afraid of losing your love. They were afraid of losing the grip they had on your emotions. They didn't walk away because they didn't care. They walked away because they were sure they still had power. They thought you'd chase. They thought you'd crack. They thought they could break your heart and still sit in the driver's seat of your soul. That was the plan until you flipped the entire script with your silence. Let me tell you something, my friends. Control isn't always loud. It's quiet. It's in the way they expect you to check in, the way they leave a little window open, just enough to keep you hoping. They might not say it out loud, but deep down, they want you lingering, waiting for a text, watching their stories, reading into every post like it's a secret message just for you. That's not connection, that's control. And when you go no contact, when you stop reacting entirely, that's when they start to lose their grip, and it terrifies them. Imagine this. They're standing on a stage, ready to perform, expecting the spotlight to hit. They look out, waiting for the applause, the reaction, the audience they've grown used to. But this time, the seats are empty. The lights don't come on, and suddenly, the show means nothing. That's what happens when you go silent. You take away their stage. You cut the wires to the performance. And the scariest thing for someone who thrives on control is when the person they once controlled disappears without a trace. Because here's what people don't want to hear. Some don't miss you. They miss the feeling of being wanted. They miss the attention. They miss knowing they had an emotional leash on you. But now, they can't feel your energy anymore. Now your name doesn't show up in their notifications. Now they're left wondering if you were ever really theirs, or if you just finally woke up. That's what silence does. It doesn't scream, it reveals. It exposes the illusion they built that you needed them more than they needed you. And when that illusion cracks, when the control slips through their fingers like sand, they don't just lose a person, they lose their power source. Now, let's address the lie they'll try to tell the world. They ghosted me. They're toxic. They're cold. Why? Because the moment you stop dancing to their tune, you become the villain in their story. But don't fall for it. Don't react. Because every time you stay calm, every time you say nothing, every time you choose restraint over retaliation, you remind them that you're no longer under their spell. And yes, it hurts. Yes, your heart wants to be understood. Yes, you probably still replay the memories in your mind. But remember this, your silence is not for them to understand. It's for you to reclaim your strength. Because the second you stop needing their validation, they lose the one thing they feared the most, the ability to influence how you feel. Stoicism teaches this one core truth. Freedom is found in self-mastery. And when you don't react, when you don't reach, when you don't explain, you're not just letting go of the person. You're letting go of the illusion that they had any real control over your identity. Let them panic. Let them feel the weight of their own decisions. Let them sit in the silence they never expected to last. Because when they realize they can no longer reach you, not emotionally, not digitally, not spiritually. That's when regret knocks on their door. Not because they lost love, but because they lost the leash. And that leash, you're never putting it back on. If you feel this in your chest right now, drop it in the comments. They lost control, not love. Hit that like button if you're done being emotionally puppeteered. Subscribe and stay right here, because next, we're stepping into something even colder, what it means to become unreachable. Folks, that's when the real shift begins. Number 6, you're not being cold. You're becoming unreachable. They called you cold because they couldn't reach the version of you that no longer needed their approval. Let's get something straight, my friends. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're acting different. They'll whisper that you've shut down, gone distant, that you're cold. But let me ask you this, were you cold, or did they just lose access to the warmth they took for granted? You're not being cold, you're becoming unreachable. And there's a big difference. See, once upon a time they had access to you, your time, your energy, your emotions, your heart. You picked up every call, you answered every message. You explained yourself even when they didn't deserve an explanation. You bent, you compromised, you poured and poured until you were empty. Even then you kept giving. But now you've gone quiet, you've gone still, you've gone stoic. And suddenly they're confused. They're uncomfortable. They don't know where you went, not physically but emotionally. That emotional access pass they used to have, it's been revoked. The one thing they weren't prepared for was losing their backstage pass to your soul. Let me give you a visual. Imagine a fireplace burning in the middle of a freezing room. It's always on, always warm, always glowing. And they stood near it whenever they felt cold, never thinking it might one day go out. But one day, you stopped feeding the flame. You realized no one else was bringing wood. As that fire died out, they finally felt the chill they never thought they'd face. Now they call it cold, but it's not coldness. It's boundaries. It's wisdom. It's finally understanding that your emotions aren't a buffet where people come and take what they want. You don't owe them warmth just because they got used to standing next to your fire. Here's the hard part. They'll try to make you feel guilty for it. They'll try to make it look like you're the problem now. Why? Because people who benefited from the old you will always be uncomfortable with the new one, especially when that new version doesn't seek approval, doesn't answer right away, and doesn't need to be understood. But you're not cold. You're clear. You've simply decided that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your healing. And let's be honest, it took pain to get here. It took disappointment. It took being misunderstood, overlooked, used, and still showing up with love. You didn't become unreachable because you're bitter. You became unreachable because you finally saw the pattern and refused to keep repeating it. The old you, the one who justified everything, who gave second, third, and fourth chances, who explained themselves into exhaustion, that version of you was accessible, predictable, easy to read, and easy to manipulate. But this version sits in silence. This version doesn't need to prove a point. This version understands that not everything needs to be said, especially when you've already shown them everything through your actions. And that, my friends, is what truly unsettles them. Not your silence, not your distance, but the realization that they no longer have access to who you were. They don't get to poke, pull, and test your patience anymore. Because you've risen above the noise. You've become a mystery. And people fear what they can't figure out. So let them wonder. Senimosen no minundunda day, nanda, na, you verlatet ze. Let them label you. Let them twist the narrative. You know the truth. You're not heartless. You're just not available to people who treated your love like an option. And when they reach out one day, and they will, don't be surprised if their first words are, "You've changed." Because yes, you have. You've changed into someone who no longer explains, no longer overextends, and no longer breaks just to keep people comfortable. Write this in the comments right now. I'm not cold. I'm unreachable. Hit that like button if you're done being emotionally accessible to those who never respected your energy. Subscribe and stay locked in, because what we're about to uncover next is where it gets real uncomfortable for them. When you stop explaining yourself and become the question they can't answer. Stay with me. Number 7, they wanted closure, but you became a question mark. They didn't walk away for peace. They walked away expecting to come back when it suited them. But now you're gone, and you didn't leave a note. Let's be real, my friends. They never wanted a clean ending. They wanted a safety net. They wanted to walk away without consequences, while keeping the door open just enough to slide back in when curiosity or boredom kicked in. What they were hoping for wasn't closure, it was control. But instead of playing your part in their little emotional play, you chose silence. You vanished. Not with noise, not with drama, not with a dramatic monologue, but with calm clarity and finality. And that's when you stopped being a chapter in their story and became a riddle they can't solve. Closure? That was just a word they used to keep the conversation going. What they really wanted was access to your feelings, your attention, your emotional energy. They didn't want to understand why it ended. They wanted to make sure you didn't. They wanted you to sit in confusion, in longing, in need. Now, they're the ones sitting in silence, scrolling through old texts, wondering if you still think about them. Let me give you a metaphor, folks. Imagine they're standing at a train station. They told themselves you'd be there, that you'd wait, that if they ever changed their minds, they could come back and pick up where things left off. But when they return, the platform is empty. No train, no noise, not even tracks, just dust, silence, and regret. That's what your no contact did. So you didn't just walk away. You made it impossible to come back the same way. You see, most people don't seek closure because they're confused. They seek closure because they're uncomfortable with silence. When you gave them nothing, not a final text, not a reply, not a goodbye, that silence became unbearable. Because silence gives them no control, no direction, no prediction, and people can't handle what they can't define. They expected you to write the last page, to tie it up neatly, to give them emotional relief while they moved on guilt-free. But you didn't. You left them with a book missing its ending. And now they're flipping back through every chapter, wondering where they lost you. Every unanswered message, every ignored story, every quiet day. It's not just silence, it's psychological weight. It's a vacuum their ego can't fill. And here's the thing, they'll pretend they're fine. They'll post like they're living their best life. But don't let the highlight reel fool you. Because every time they laugh a little too loud, every time they post a little too perfect, that's not joy. It's noise. It's a distraction from the question echoing in the back of their minds. Why haven't they said anything? You're not a chapter they closed. You're the sentence they can't finish. And don't get it twisted. This doesn't make you heartless. It makes you wise. You're not denying them closure out of spite. You're denying them the privilege of knowing where your peace began. Because they lost the right to understand you the moment they chose not to value you. They walked out like you'd always be available, but they came back to a locked door. And now they're left knocking with no answer. That's the cost of underestimating someone who loved you deeply. They thought you were predictable, but now you're unpredictable, you're unreadable. And the moment they can't predict you anymore, they start obsessing, because the human mind can't stand open loops. It needs resolution. And your silence? That's a loop they can't close, so let them chase their own thoughts. Let them try to piece together the puzzle. Let them wonder who you've become. Because when they left, they were expecting a version of you that no longer exists. Comment this below if you've closed the door without slamming it. I became the question. Hit that like button if you've decided that you owe no explanations, no final words, no emotional encore. Subscribe and stay with me, because up next, we're talking about what happens when they finally try to reach out and find out they don't know how to reach you. Number 8. You don't go silent to be wanted. You go silent to become untouchable. They thought silence was weakness, but it was the doorway to a version of you they could never reach again. Let's make one thing very clear, my friends. This silence isn't a strategy to get them back. It's not some sneaky reverse psychology to make them miss you. Oh, that's small thinking, that's desperate energy. That's their level. But you're not there anymore. You didn't go quiet to be noticed. You went quiet to become untouchable, unreadable, unbothered. You chose silence not to manipulate someone else's emotions, but to master your own. They think they've got you figured out. They believe this is just another one of your phases. They assume you're watching them from the shadows, waiting, wondering, checking in from a fake account, hoping they'll say something. But what they don't realize is the version of you that once did that doesn't live here anymore. You used to be accessible, always there, always responding, always holding space, even for those who didn't know what to do with it. But now you've become a ghost. Not the haunting kind, but the evolved kind. The type that leaves no trace, no signal, no emotional footprint. And that kind of silence, it's not emptiness, it's elevation. Imagine this. You're no longer standing in front of their door, you're on a mountain. No signal, no noise, just clarity, just distance, just vision. They're calling out, but the sound doesn't reach you anymore. Because when you go silent the right way, you're not just ignoring them, you've outgrown them. They used to be the center of your emotional world. Everything they said, every little shift in energy, every unanswered text affected you. It got under your skin. But now you move in silence. You create, you build, you elevate. While they're wondering if you still care, you're out there designing a life that doesn't include them in the blueprint. You didn't go quiet to punish them. You went quiet to protect your peace. And trust me, they feel it. That lack of reaction, that absence of emotion, that's what unsettles them more than any angry message ever could. Because silence doesn't beg, silence doesn't explain, silence doesn't seek validation. It withdraws, reclaims, and rises. Let's be honest, it wasn't easy. You fought urges. You wanted to reach out. You wanted to say your piece, to remind them of what they lost, to show them you're still standing. But then you realized you don't need to be seen by people who only looked when you were breaking. You don't need to be heard by someone who stopped listening long ago. You don't need to prove anything to the person who made you feel replaceable. They'll start to notice slowly. They'll feel the shift, the absence, the vacuum, and what used to feed their ego. Your reaction will be gone. That's when they'll spiral. That's when curiosity becomes obsession. Because when someone can no longer feel your energy, they start chasing the ghost of it. But by then, you're already gone. Not physically, but energetically, spiritually, emotionally. You're in a different league. And the truth is, they can't reach you anymore. Not because you blocked them, not because you hate them, but because you outgrew the version of yourself that needed their love to feel whole. Stoic philosophy teaches us that true power lies in detachment. Not indifference, not bitterness, but freedom. The ability to walk away without needing the other person to follow. And when you master that, you don't chase closure. You become the closure. So no, this silence isn't about pulling them back in. It's about pulling yourself forward. It's not about revenge. It's about rebirth. And once you become untouchable, once you find that peace in your own company, once you realize your worth has nothing to do with their ability to see it, that's when they start to feel the void. But here's the twist. They won't come back for love. They'll come back to see if they still have power. Don't give it to them. Your silence wasn't a pause. It was a goodbye they never heard. And there it is, my friends, the truth they never saw coming. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was your awakening. Every day you stayed silent, you didn't just protect your peace, you rebuilt your power. They expected you to chase, but instead you chose clarity. You became the mystery they can't solve, the question they can't stop asking. This journey isn't about revenge, it's about rebirth. If this message hit home, show some love. Hit that like button. Share this with someone rising in silence and subscribe for more truth, strength, and stoic fire. Comment below. My silence changed everything.